The Carlisle sound map in context. In summer 2020, as Britain emerged blinking into the sunlight after weeks of lockdown, hopes were high that a return to normality might not be too far away. COVID-19 had first appeared on the periphery of our lives in the last days of 2019, as we read reports of the first cases in China and elsewhere across the globe. Within months, however, its inexorable spread had brought it to the very centre of our daily existence. Words like lockdown, self-isolation, furlough, and key workers rapidly became part of our day-to-day vocabulary, while constant sanitising and the wearing of face masks, which had seemed so strange and novel in the pandemic's early days, soon became ubiquitous and unremarkable. That first lockdown placed an intense psychological and economic strain on the nation. Little did we know what more was in store, and the relaxation of the first lockdown in summer 2020 seemed a cause for celebration. The sun was occasionally shining, and finally we could meet with friends and relatives. There were barbecues and meals out, which, under the Eat Out to Help Out scheme, became something of a patriotic obligation, and socially distanced pints, as we appreciated afresh all that had been denied us over the preceding months, and which we had once taken for granted. The daily COVID-19 briefings from Downing Street stopped on June the 23rd. Henceforth, there would only be press briefings when significant announcements were to be made, further adding to the sense that we were, perhaps, out of the woods. Yet even as the summer sun tried to warm a nation that had spent an inordinate amount of time indoors, it was clear that storm clouds were gathering. The relaxation of lockdown restrictions and the partial opening up of the economy had led to a surge in the virus, and by September, it was becoming increasingly evident that new measures would be needed. The so-called Rule of Six came into effect in England on September the 14th, which attempted to limit public gatherings, but by the end of the month, new infections were spiralling out of control, with the UK reporting a record rise in daily infections on the 29th. In October, we saw the introduction of the tier system. Initially, most of Cumbria was in the lowest tier, Tier 1, though higher infection rates in Carlisle and Barrow resulted in Tier 2 classification. But it soon became apparent that a new lockdown was on the horizon. It was at this point, too, that the Carlisle Sound Map project came into existence. It began in early October, with the aim of creating a sonic map through which to record the daily reality of life at an extraordinary moment in time. By October, the novelty of the pandemic's early period had long since worn off. Phrases like the new normal had become cliches through overuse. The new normal had simply become normal, even if there didn't seem to be anything normal about it. And the wearying mundanity of pandemic existence, along with the trauma of isolation, loss, and uncertainty, had become the reality of daily life. Indeed, the relative freedom of the summer months was to prove short-lived. At a press conference on October the 31st, Boris Johnson announced a new circuit breaker lockdown, due to start on November the 5th, in order to protect the NHS from what he described as a medical and moral disaster. A fatigued nation prepared itself once again to retreat from the public sphere, and though the new lockdown came to an end at the start of December, the return of the tier system brought scant comfort as the winter nights drew in. The one bright light on the horizon was Christmas. The Prime Minister had promised a 5-day relaxation of restrictions in order to allow multiple households to celebrate together. But on December the 19th, the plans were scrapped. A maximum of 2 households were allowed to meet on Christmas Day itself, meaning that many endured a lonely and difficult Christmas that will be long remembered and hopefully never repeated. New Year brought little cheer too. On New Year's Eve, Cumbria woke up to the news that it would be entering the highest possible tier, Tier 4. And at the start of January, a third lockdown was announced to further curb the spread of the virus. It was now over a year since the first reported cases, and by the end of the month, the UK had reached the grim milestone of 100,000 deaths due to COVID-19. Moreover, there was little clarity as to when the restrictions would ease, and Cumbria entered the third lockdown with weary resignation. There was, however, a glimmer of hope on the horizon. On December the 8th, 2020, 90-year-old Margaret Keenan became the first British citizen to receive the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine, and the development of other vaccines pointed, for the first time, towards a clear way out of our viral predicament. The programme proceeded apace, And by the end of February 2021, the Prime Minister felt confident enough to outline a roadmap towards the end of restrictions. Though this would be a gradual process, and of course could be subject to change, it seemed to offer real hope. And as winter gives way to spring, perhaps we can allow ourselves to look forward to summer with excitement instead of apprehension. Of course, as the pandemic has shown, we can never be sure of what the future holds, but resignation is, perhaps, giving way to a cautious sense of optimism. In time, we will look back on the pandemic as a moment in history, one of those events which define an era and become a measuring point in the passing of time. No doubt there will be biological, political, economic and cultural assessments of the COVID-19 crisis, which brought out the best in so many people and occasionally the worst in others. But we will also remember the pandemic as a lived experience, as a social reality, and it is precisely this which the Carlisle Sound Map aims to capture. The sounds within it are diverse, from poetry to birdsong and even the sound of recycling, providing an audible record of an extraordinary time. Together, they help to document the way that the people of Carlisle lived through the pandemic and remind us not only of the way that our lives changed beyond all recognition, but also how daily life continues amidst uncertainty and adversity.